So the farm is, we've got, farm is predominantly dairy. Is there a pause button on this? No? Just whatever way I've set it up. Right. I just have to keep going back. So we're predominantly dairy. Obviously, we've come from the Northern Irish farm, where traditionally would have been mixed farm, but over the years it's been concentrated towards dairy. In my time, it's always been dairy. The only arable we grow would be whole crop, and we do keep a bit of beef, but that would just be dairy bred beef. So I'm the fourth generation. My great grandfather bought the farm on the Ballybogey Road. We aim to be autumn calving, although it does slip into right in through to February. But we were, up until recently, we were calving for nearly 9 months of the year, and we're down now to. So we're starting now, and we will be finished in January this year. We're milking 260 cows, 260, 280. We've been at that sort of numbers now for the best part of 15 years. We started crossbreeding in 2018, sorry. We had been a predominantly Holstein herd. Whenever I first came home, we were chasing yield, but we went for the crossbreed. We brought in Montbéliard cows for their strength and the milk protein, and we brought in the Viking Reds for their health traits. We started zero grazing in 2015, so after a number of very challenging years in 12, 13, we ended up, every year we'd sort of, we'll cut all the ground for first cut, then we'll put them out, and then we'll cut all the ground for first and second cut, and then we'll put them out, and then by 2014 they were staying in all the time. 2014, in terms of production, was a fantastic year. The cows were, you could micromanage cows that were in the shed all year. You knew exactly what you had in the pit. You knew exactly what you had in the field. I remember we got to the end of 2014, we realised we'd fed 4 tonne of cow. We went, right, something has to change. So that's what took us down the zero grazing system. And we milked them through we're still very traditional, no robots. We just, the powder was put in 2001. So I'm going to start off talking about our side of the direct sales. So we put in a milk vending machine in 2020. So the idea, the milk enemies haven't seen the milk vending machine. We have a vending machine that sells glass bottles and a vending machine that sells the milk. You can buy the glass bottle. It's dishwasher proof safe. So why did we put in a milk vending machine? Simple reason for the milk vending machine was I love milk, but people tell me they don't like milk. First thing I say is I'm not surprised if you're buying it from the supermarket. Also, like I said, the glass bottles, so we ought to let people taste the difference. The glass bottles in 2019, we all saw the David Attenborough documentary of the single-use plastics. So the idea of a milk vending machine, not only could people buy the milk direct from the farm, taste what milk's supposed to taste like, but it was trying to reduce that single-use plastic, and also to try and reconnect people with the farm. You'll have all seen the social media that farmers get a real bashing, so it was nice to be able to get people into the yard and speak to them. Now, we don't get much time, but we do try and speak to them as much as we can. So what makes our milk different? The main differences in our milk is the first one's the pasteurization. So our milk's gently pasteurized. So we batch pasteurize the milk, it goes into a vat, heat it up to 63 degrees, and we hold it there for 30 minutes. Now that differs from the milk you would get in the supermarket. The big creameries use what they call flash pasteurization or continuous flow pasteurization, where the milk passes through a coil and it's heated to 72 degrees, and it's held there for 15 seconds, and it's just about volumes. It's about getting that milk, as much milk through as possible. So because we're at the scale we're at, we can just do small batches, and it just retains that natural flavour. The other big one is the non-homogenized milk. So all milk that you buy in supermarkets is homogenized. Homogenization is whenever they push the milk through very small holes at very high pressure, and it breaks down the fat globules, which means the milk doesn't settle, the cream doesn't rise to the top, and it's a shelf life thing, and part of it is to do with the aesthetic of it. The supermarkets decided that they wanted the milk to look better, and the best way to do this was to homogenize it because they didn't like this cream layer. People thought the milk was going off or something. So our milk's not homogenized. The other big difference is the standardization of milk. So milk in the supermarket is standardized to 3.6% fat. Now, I don't know any dairy farmers that are as low as 3.6. Our cows are currently sitting about 4.4, 4.5, but as a herd average for the year, it'd be about 4.1, 4.2. So the standardization is just they take the milk in, they take all the cream out, and then they put back in a standard amount. So the whole milk in the supermarket is 3.6. So it's everything. It's like everything you get in supermarkets nowadays. It all has to be a standard amount. The big thing with us then is the farm fresh thing. So the milk that you get in our vending machine is never any more than 48 hours old. Quite often milk's 48 hours old before it even gets lifted from a farm. Never mind take to the dairy, processed, packaged, and took to supermarkets. Low food miles. So you buy the milk from the vending machine, which is 50 yards from the milking powder. And hopefully more environmentally friendly and sustainable. The other big product that we do is our own Greek-style yogurt. We started the Greek-style yogurt in 2022. So it's very basic. We just take our milk, we add the culture, we incubate it overnight, we strain it, and that gives you the Greek-style yogurt. So like I say, started in 2022. We do 450 gram tubs. We also now do kilo tubs for food service, for cafes and stuff. Our local cafe just up the road does it in a granola bowl. We applied to an innovation voucher. We got working with Caffrey to develop our yogurt. We tried different strains of culture. We tried different straining times, all sorts of different things. Whenever we set out to make yogurt, we didn't set out to make Greek yogurt, but we were trying to make a luxurious thick yogurt, and the only way we managed to achieve that was through straining it. So the difference in standard yogurt and authentic Greek yogurt is just the difference in straining it through muslin cloth. That's what you see in the picture here. That's the yogurt. We'll put that yogurt into a bucket, tie it up to a bag, let it strain, and then that's what makes it Greek style yogurt. And we have to call it Greek style instead of Greek yogurt because it's made in Portrush and not in Greece. We had a social media influencer we saw recently who was saying that Greek style yogurt, need to avoid that in supermarkets because it's full of, Greek style means that it's not natural yogurt. It's got additives and emulsifiers and standardized, and that may be true about supermarket yogurt, but our Greek style yogurt is just our milk, the culture. The only thing that's took out of it is the whey, and the only thing that's added to it is the culture. We sell that on our vending machine, and obviously we have a couple of stockers then too. So, this thing thinks I'm a very fast speaker. So back to a bit about me. So back from the farm after 3 years in Newcastle, 9 months in New Zealand, and I got stuck in. Like I say, my dad, whenever I came home, our mantra was litres up the lane pays the bills. We were Holstein cows, we were feeding hard, we were pushing big litres. And 2014, milk price was 35p. It was great. You know, whenever 35p for your milk and your meal's only costing you 20p a kilogram, those numbers add up. But whenever things go the other direction, it's just difficult to justify. So like I say, we started zero grazing in 2015. Like I've explained, about the meal cost we had from 2014 was just was crippling for us. So we went to zero grazing. And the idea with that was that we could, obviously I said we had difficult years in 12 and 13. Our grazing management wasn't great. Our soil health management probably wasn't great, which made it even more difficult to graze. And we thought the answer was zero grazing. Now, with the zero grazing, we were able to go out into fields. I've seen me cutting grass and standing water and getting grass into cows. Cow numbers are an issue. Trying to graze 260 cows into one field on the north coast of North Antrim on a heavy farm, it's very difficult. Pugging and such sites. So we have, with the zero grazers, allowed us to increase the forage inclusion in our diet and manage our grass better. The crossbreeding with the Holstein cows, we were just, the biggest problem I saw with the Holstein cow was that we weren't getting more than one lactation out of cows. A lot of the heifers weren't breeding back, and the cost to rear heifers was becoming a real issue. And we were, so I looked out, I was invited to go on a trip to Denmark to see Viking Holsteins. The Scandinavian countries have great health traits, and went to see these. And whenever we were there, we were took to a Procross farm, which Procross, for those of you who don't know, is the mixture of Holsteins, the Montbéliard, and the Viking Red, the Scandinavian red breeds. And we were on a farm. The guy was he was big litres, but he had to increase his voluntary waiting period because his cows were so fertile they were going back and calve too quickly. The cows were, on average, he was getting over five lactations from them, and I was just looking at those cows going, that's the answer. So I've come home and I've got into that. People ask me, is crossbreeding the answer? I think you need to be at it 10 years before you would really know. But the other big change we've made then was to start introducing multi-species sward. So around that time in 2018, I was looking into the crossbreeding. I started to hear more and more about The importance of soil health, the regenerative movement. Now, on our farm, my father's always been interested in soil health. We use a product, you'll see it out there, called Physilith. My dad's been using it from back, he remembers my grandfather using it. Back then it was called Merman. It was a calcified seaweed product, T400. You can still buy it under that guise. And we've been using that since then. So in 2020, this is a picture from 2020 where we decided to try and introduce some multi-species sward to see if we could get some diversity into our swards. Obviously, like I say, we were using the zero grazer. This is a field, it's the only sandy field we have. It's a 4-acre field that we rent. It looks out over Royal Portrush Golf Course. And we cut the grass in the 1st of April, direct drilled the multi-species sward into it in 10 days later, and 10 days after that we zero grazed it, and this was the result. Now in 2024 you'll find that the plantain and the chicory are starting to disappear out of that, but for the last 4 years it's been very good, and we've noticed a real difference with whenever it's only 4 acres. Whenever you're feeding that to 160 cows, it doesn't last very well, but the cows tell you that it does make a difference, like they do whenever they get into that grass. You do see a slight rise in the tank, and you'll the way they eat it, the way they tuck into it, you can tell that they really enjoy it. Another thing that we've tried was because of the way we bed. The middle picture there is a picture of our calf feeding shed. So what we do with the calf feeding shed is we lay down a layer of wood chip, and then we bed over the top of that with straw. And the wood chip's just to allow the straw more soak. So whenever calves are on a calf feeder, the biggest problem is the moisture, the urine. So the wood chip was letting the urine get away. And what we were struggling with then is the wood chip. What do we do with the wood chip? We were finding whenever you spread it in the field, the wood chip would still be there 5, 6, 7 years later. So I heard about Bokashi. So we tried the Bokashi because I was told it would break down the wood chip. Now, impatient as I am as a dairy farmer, we made the Bokashi pile. So we sprinkled the eggshells over to the top of the dung, put on the Actifirm, which is the bacterial treatment for it, and then whenever we were taking that out, then that was all mixed through the process of dumping it into the dump trailer, taking it out to the field, tipping it. We put more Actifirm over the top of it, and we sealed it. Now the results we found from that were the Bokashi worked fantastically on the dung. Like whenever we uncovered that to spread that, we did that in the springtime, and then at the back end of that year, we took that to spread on our field that we were. It was a field we were planning on tilling. The only problem was that in that 6-month period, it wasn't good for didn't do any good for the wood chip. Now I've been told since that if I'd left it longer, or if I go and look for that wood chip in that field, that the breakdown process had been accelerated, and I'd probably struggle to find the wood chip in the field. So if I go and dig for the wood chip, they tell me it will be gone. But just visually, in that 6-month period, it didn't help with the wood chip. I don't know where I'm going next. Sorry, I'm giving you a real hard time back there. So this is just I'm sort of the way I've set up this presentation. It's making it very difficult for me to. But what I'm doing is just talking about some of the things we've tried. So that's the Actifirm. That's the biological treatment. You see the eggshells on the dung, and that's the final pile size. So what we've done from there. So the Actifirm, I'm told, is a very similar product to the BAM, the beneficial anaerobic microbes, and this is the product that you buy from. It's an NTS product. So what we've done now is you buy a 20-litre jar and you brew it up. So we started in the blue barrel, we brewed up 200 litres of it. So you just add the BAM to the molasses and leave it to incubate. You can maybe not see it in that picture, but there's a small airlock on top of that cube. So it's as it's anaerobic, you have to keep the oxygen out of it. That cube. That take a photo of the pH meter. I've just tested that last week. That took 4 weeks. So now I have 1,000 litres of beneficial anaerobic microbes. What I'll use that for, I've already used 200 litres out of that. We put it onto baled silage that we're making. With customers who had grown 4 acres of arable silage approached me to see if I was interested in buying it, and I said I would like to try this on it, and I've opened the bale yesterday, and it seems to have done a fantastic job on it. It was baled under challenging conditions, and there's no mould on the outside of the bales, and the cows lapped it up, and it was a fairly strawy product. The other thing we'll be using this for is we'll be introducing this spraying this onto the calf pens, calving pens and stuff. 2 reasons for that. The theory behind it is if you introduce this good bacteria into the calving pens, the pathogenic bacteria can't compete. The other reason is then the dung that comes out of those pens will be inoculated with this, and hopefully it'll create a quicker breakdown in the dung pile to create a better product whenever we're starting to spread that. The biggest change we've made this 2 years ago was to go foliar feeding for our nitrogen. So we bought a sprayer 2 years ago. I managed to pick that up out of Scotland fairly cheap. The idea with the foliar feeding is if we can apply our nitrogen to the plant, we can reduce the amount of nitrogen we need by 50%. It also takes away the damage that is done from adding prilled fertilizer to the soil, so the soil doesn't have the challenge of having those salt fertilizers added to it. It also increases our ability to use other products. So this year we've been with the foliar feeding. We add humates, which binds to the nitrogen, makes the nitrogen much more stable, but it also opens up the ability to use products like this specialized the C90 product, which is a sea salt product. C90 because there's 90 minerals in it, just to address any other deficiencies. This year we bought this machine. It's a toe invert, so we can drop all this into that. There's a big impeller in the bottom of that, mixes it all together. We just buy the urea as a prilled compound. It'll dissolve it. We can add our humates, we can add our sea salt. It mixes it all. There's a 4,000 litre tank in that. I can do up to 50 acres at a time with this. We also, the BAM that I talked about previously, we'll be adding that in. Adding the beneficial anaerobic microbes. Part of that blend is there's nitrogen fixing bacteria in that blend too. The other big thing we tried this year was seed treatment. So the NTS company is it's a Graham Sate from Australia. His company produces these products. So trikelp is a seaweed extract from 3 different seaweeds. The fulvic acid powder is a carbon source. You can see in the third picture there we have a bucket of milk. So we mix these things into a bucket of milk, and we also use some of Brona, who has been one of the main organisers of this. Has got a worm farm, so we use some vermicompost. Now, having listened to Graham Sate numerous podcasts, one of his homemade seed treatment that he recommends is 1 kilo to the ton of fulvic acid powder, 1 kilo to the ton of trikelp. So the fulvic acid powder creates this carbon source. It's also a root stimulant. The trikelp gives you the minerals. The seaweed, anybody that's used seaweed knows all the trace elements are there. And then the vermicompost will add in the biologicals. So we mixed that and mixed it with milk, and then added that to the seed. You can see we had a bit of help. Edward got the great job of pulling the string on the seed bag. You all know how satisfying it is to get the first pull and get the seed bag to open. So this is myself and Shay who's going to speak. So we mixed this seed. This is the product. What we're mixing this onto in this video is we're growing. So to take the diversity from the multi-species sward that we're talking about, and to try and achieve diversity, but also to feed a dairy herd, I decided to try a mixed arable silage. So we mixed barley, oats, and peas. So we feed, because we were a housed herd all winter, we feed a lot of silage. Whole crop's fantastic in a cow's gut. The whole crop silage we would normally use would just be oats. The problem with it is it's 9% crude protein. Whenever you feed that to the cows, you dilute their ration. You have to bring in more soya to try and make up for that dilution. This soya is expensive, not terribly regenerative, but my solution to this was to try and mix to grow my own protein. So this is our second year doing this. The first year we just bought the seed in and went full tillage with it, and had a great crop. And the arable silage tested at 14.5% crude protein. So we achieved what we aimed for. We had silage. We had whole crop silage, which was good for the cow's gut at a far higher protein. So we were fit to reduce the amount of imported protein. This year we took the barley out of the mix this year and added triticule in because the barley matured too quickly, and we saw it coming through in the cow's dung. We weren't getting the benefit of the barley because it wasn't broke down enough. So we mixed this, and what we did was then we were we planted it into some of Shay's ground this year. Shay will talk about where he's got ground. Now the ground that Shay has, obviously our ground at home with traditional farming and all the inputs we have, the amount of slurry we have, the soil is very fertile. We don't have much issues with infertility. The farm that Shay got had not been managed ideally. There was a real ragweed problem in the fields, and Shay approached me to ask me how I would manage that without, in the situation that Shay's in, inputs are to be kept to a minimum. No sprays, no slurry, no chemical fertilizer. And my suggestion was that this would be the way to go. So we went and we ploughed it, and we treated the seed because the soil didn't have the fertility that our soil at home would have. And I was worried about investing the seed into this piece of land and it not growing. So that's what we did. We treated the seed with those 3 products, mixed it in a cement mixer. What was it, 3 ton of seed, Shay? 100 kilos at a time in the cement mixer. So you can imagine the labour that went into that. Maybe not an ideal in a large scale arable, but we were only sowing 35 acres. So it was grand. We were fit to do it in an evening. And whenever we planted it, everybody knows how difficult this spring was. Most people like to have their barley in April, and locally there was no barley going in until May, and we were planting this in May too. Like I say, the first year we did it at home, I was able to take a cut of grass, plant my mixed arable silage, and then plant the multi-species swart grass back in again in the same year. Now, with Shay's ground, there was no grass on it to take a cut of grass in May, so we just went straight in with the arable silage. And whenever we planted it, like I say, everybody else was planting their barley, and every time I went over to look at it, you were driving past fields of barley that had been planted basically the same day, within the same week, and you could see traditional barley that had been planted with fertilizer down the chute, and it was coming. It was 4 inches tall, and you're going over here, and there was nothing happening. Now, it heard all big consumer of podcasts and audiobooks. Nicole Masters speaks about it. Graham Sate speaks about it. Whenever you seed treat, very often, what you'll see is it'll not come through the ground. It encourages the plant to grow the roots first and then send the shoots up. So that's what we saw here. But whenever you're relying on 35 acres of arable silage to fill a forage deficit, I was getting very nervous coming into June whenever there was nothing, very, very little showing in these fields. But lo and behold, even with challenging conditions, it took off. And what you see in that photo is what they call a rhizosheath. Now, I didn't do a test plot to show untreated seed or treated seed, but I can be fairly certain that wouldn't have been the case without the treatment in the seed and the type of soil that it was. Now, we didn't spray this ground off. We just ploughed it down and planted this in, and there was no ragwort in the silage. It was harvested 3 weeks ago, and if there was ragwort there, you would have seen it because it would have been bright yellow, standing up in the middle of the field. But you can see the oats, the triticale, and the peas. The peas didn't do just as well as I'd liked, but the previous year I put too much peas in and it pulled the whole crop down. It was impossible to harvest, so we reduced the percentage of peas in the mix from 35 down to 25, and I think it just struggled in some of that drier, sandier soil. But the peas were still there. Shay had some bees brought to the farm, and the beekeeper was very pleased with the yield of honey he was getting. And once again, what was a challenging year. So we have this in the pit. We also undersowed it this year, which was I didn't manage to do on my own farm. And I don't know, I haven't been over. Shay, how's it doing? So it was a 14 species mix of a grass seed mix. So this is the analysis we got from our whole crop from our own that we fed it this year. As you can see there, crude protein of 14.7% in what is whole crop silage is fantastic. Rarely you would see much more than 10. And we do feel that the cows performed really well on it. So the next slide, what I've got here is, and it's going to be really hard to talk about these because they keep jumping off the screen. You couldn't pause, no? So this is the Solvia test that's done by Grassland Agro. On the left is the first Solvia fit test that we did in 2001. So in the bottom left of this, you've got the 3 soil health indicators. The top one of the 2 in the bottom left is the CO2 burst. So in 2001, our CO2 burst was off the scale that they have. It was 239, and I was speaking to Colin Bolton over in the tent there before I came over, And he says he's been doing sulfate tests now since 2021, and he still hasn't found a CO2 burst that's been higher than that. So this field is a field beside our house, and I've been trying to reduce our nitrogen inputs for 10 years. The tow fert we bought this year is just the next step from that. Like I say, we use the Physiolith. My dad's been using it for his lifetime, and Grandy used it. So we do have healthy soil. The page beside it, you can see, is 2022. And you'd wonder now, why has my CO2 burst went down, whenever you would assume that if I'm on a regenerative journey that my soil health practices would get better. And the truth about that is, that was a cold spell. The sample was taken after 3 weeks of cold weather in July. I know it's hard to believe, but that's Northern Ireland for you. And the only thing I can put that down to is the biology just was not functioning as well as it was the previous year, just because of the temperature. But you can still see the pH is good, the carbon's there. The carbon to nitrogen ratio was the big one. On the right hand side of the bottom is CO2, or the nitrogen release. So this is available naturally available nitrogen, and the bottom left, very bottom left one is amino N. So these are the sulfate tests. These the amino N is just a measure of how much biological nitrogen is available in the soil. Now, how much of it is there? Harry, you maybe could talk about this better than me. Correct me if I'm wrong. Label nitrogen. That's the biological activity. Yeah. So in the table in the middle of the page, you've got your pH, and I'm going to actually just go down to see this. Maybe a bit easier to read here. pH, total carbon. So our pH, it's reading 5.9 in these two readings. So they would say that's probably, you'd all think that's a bit low, but if you test pH in the middle of the summer and the soil is biologically active, it tends to be low because the soil is producing acids in soil to feed the plants and stuff. This is 23 and 24, and what we have here is you can see the pH. This field has been treated with the T400 product, but it's only getting 200 kilograms per acre of that per year. So we're not bulk liming any of our ground anymore because we're using this product. Total carbon is rising. The soil organic matter, it's obviously with field samples, the human error and the variability you're going to get between the samples just from where the sample patch has been taken. But we're sitting at the 12.69 on the left hand side and 14.6. The total nitrogen of 0.8 and 0.7. The C10 ratio is a big one, and I think it's one we need to talk more about in Northern Ireland. We hear a lot of talk about getting carbon into our soils. This soil sample shows we don't have a deficit of carbon in our soil. What we have is a problem cycling carbon, and that's where the CO2 burst comes in. Now, this field, I got this field tested, and I've focused on this field because I knew the practices in this field is something I've been focusing on the soil health in here, and I'm trying to increase it every year. But it's a field because it's beside the house. I have been using this field as a trial plot, but you'll get soil samples in Northern Ireland with a CO2 burst of 40, and if you dug that soil up and you're getting a CO2 burst of 40, that soil's stagnant. That soil's dead. That's going to starting to smell bad almost. So back to what I was saying, we do need to focus on carbon, but we need to be cycling the carbon. And to cycle the carbon, you need the biology there. And to get the biology there, you need just checking that just cut me off. the meter ran out there. So in my view, what we're doing with what I'm trying to get to is we have to feed a dairy herd to produce milk. So I'm trying to the diversity in that silage, the bulk of growth that I'm getting out of that in this 4-month period, like that, while that crop's growing, that crop's cycling carbon. It's respiring, it's photosynthesizing, putting the carbon down into the exudates, and it's waking that soil up. Now, ploughing's not ideal. In an ideal world, I would direct drill that, but whenever you've got soils as cold as they are, as we've had this year, sometimes they just need that soil disturbance just to get them going. And if that soil gets drilled into grass then, and it's in grass for the next 10 years, that one ploughing is not going to, it's not going to be harmful to that, to the overall picture of the farm. I think that's just the last slide. My resources, you've all heard a lot of these here. The obvious ones of Gabe Brown and Nicole Masters. David Montgomery is fantastic books. His Dirt, what he wrote, it's the erosion of civilizations and how farming has caused civilizations to disappear. The Romans, the Greeks, they've seen it time and time again. The Growing Revolution, Heaven Half Nature, he wrote with his wife, who's a biologist, and they're really good. He's a geologist, so to have that, a book wrote by those two viewpoints, some really interesting stuff. Dan Barber's also one of my favorite. He's a chef from upstate New York. He has opened a restaurant to try and to use regenerative foods, and he went on a journey to try and find regenerative produce to use in his restaurant. And the journey that took him on was fascinating. The other big one I didn't talk about so much with my slide was Maynard Murray, Sea Energy Agriculture, Three from the Bottom, and then the follow-up book from Charles Walters about fertility from the ocean deep. This is to talk about the power of the sea salt that I use, seaweed would be the same, just the minerals that are involved there, and the power that has. And then obviously you've got all your podcasts that I listen to, the Charlie Arnott, not so much now, but Graham Sayett's an Australian. John Kempf is an American agronomist who does some very, very interesting podcasts. And then just some of the more beef ranching podcasts. But that's it. Just, if you want to taste some of our milk, like I say, not regenerative, but we're trying. It's very difficult in the dairy industry. And we'll let Shay go, because I've spent a lot longer talking than I planned to.
Thank you. My name is Shay O'Neill from Seaview Farms. We farm in Castle Rock in the north coast of Northern Ireland. My wife and I farm there. So an overview of, I suppose, our business. We started this journey in about 2020. We started with 2 pigs, and if anybody's kept pigs, they know how quickly that gets out of hand, very quickly. So we used to farrow all our own pigs, then we moved to buying weaners, and we buy weaners now, we don't farrow anymore. We produce all our own beef, lamb, pork, and chicken, all direct marketed to local businesses, wholesaled to high-end restaurants, farm shops, cafes, predominantly. So, an overview of our farm now. We were very fortunate this year, this is our first year in it, to acquire a National Trust tenancy in the North Coast. So this is our first year managing that property. We're kind of getting our feel for it. Before that, we farmed around 20 acres of very different ground in Dungannon. And that was a mixture of kind of family farm ground and rented ground. All our land's rented. So even now. So we have, again, a beef, cattle, sheep, pigs and poultry operation. So our goal over the next 10 years, we would love to have 50 to 60 cows, depending on what the soil can hold sustainably, of a cow herd. Our poultry operation, following the cow herd, and pigs intermittently spaced in amongst that, and sheep. Sheep, we're new in the sheep. We see a lot of potential with the sheep, but we have no idea how many sheep we can have, and we'll just have to kind of suck it and see as time goes on. So these are the first 2 pigs we started with, 2 Berkshire gilts, and they produced many, many piglets, and it was great until it wasn't. And this is the second group of sows we have. We farrowed everything outdoors, and when a day like that, the sun's shining and everything's going well, it is one of the best things you can do. It's very rewarding, and when everything's going well, it's great. Come a couple of days of damp weather, and things can change in a hurry. That's some of our fattening pigs on pasture as well. So we had paddock set up. Our goal was to move the pigs as frequently as the land needed. We had an ad lib feeder there. We fed them ad lib. We found that if you fed them ad lib, they done way less damage to the overall pasture. If they were feeding them once or twice a day, they had a lot more time to cause damage. Our cow herd, we've been working on our cow herd for a number of years now. Our goal is, and after having seen Greg Judy's presentation, I wish I didn't put any photographs of my cows in. But anyway, this is not our cow, but this is a cow we would love to, this is the kind of cow we really want. We want a smaller frame cow with shorter legs. We want the weight, but we don't want all that space between our legs. Hormonal balance is extremely important to us. I'm a big disciple of Steve Campbell and Jan Bosma, and we're trying to breed, hormonally balanced for a productive, fertile animal. The red Solo Cup cow, if anybody knows Steve Campbell, that's what we're trying to go for. We're only a small herd. We've only got about 20 cows at the minute, but we do cull very hard. We maybe cull 25 to 30% of our herd every year. If she doesn't calve at 24 months and have a calf every year, it doesn't matter how much I like her, she's out of here. And that's all with the goal of having a profitable, fertile cow that lasts a long time and doesn't cause any problems. So yeah, that's the kind of cow we're looking for. So this is one of my cows. She's a 6-year-old with a fourth calf. This is her fourth calf. This calf was literally born probably 2 months ago now. So we can see there, she's walking downhill. She's carrying good condition, moderate frame. She calves every year, unassisted. Problem with that cow, in my opinion, is she's too long a leg, and I'd like her a bit longer in the body. But again, she's kind of what we're going for. This is the kind of bull we want to use. This is one of my Beefmaster bulls. He is good hormonal balance. I would like him walking a wee bit more uphill if I had to be critical. But he is the reverse wedge, narrow chest, taller at the front. Wide chest, narrow rump, tall at the front. He's a masculine appearance, and he's good temperament. And hopefully we have some calves from him last year, and he's getting a bigger chance this year on more cows. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to produce is a delicious, nutritious, healthy product to sell to our customers and ultimately keep our beef operation profitable, because if we're not profitable what we're doing, then what's the point? Our sheep enterprise is, as I said, relatively new. We're still learning the sheep game and making plenty of mistakes, but I see a lot of potential with sheep. Same as the cows, we're trying to breed hormonally balanced sheep. We're using easy cares. Their natural wool shedding ability eliminates a lot of work, hopefully eliminates a lot of fly problems and pests. We would love to breed a pest-resistant sheep and then obviously market those genetics as time goes on. I suppose it's important to mention here as well that the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do with our entire operation is focusing on soil health. As Greg said, if anybody heard his talk, we're soil microbe farmers first, and then grass, and then the animals. The animals are the combine that harvests the crop that the soil microbes produce. And that's what we want to do to the best of our ability. We want to improve the health of the soil, improve the soil's natural carrying capacity, and as a result then hopefully have a profitable, sustainable business for generations going forward. Our poultry enterprise is something that I think we're pretty unique in. It is probably, if not one of our most profitable enterprises on the entire farm. It's unbelievable. So they're all broilers, 100% pasture raised. They're slow grown. Our birds are about 3 times the age of your commercial shop bought birds. We move our birds in chicken tractors at least twice a day to fresh grass. Every time we feed them, they're moved to fresh grass, and in so doing, they spread their manure out over the paddock. They open up they eat a lot of the slugs and pests. They cause havoc to frogs. but they spread fertility. They eat the fly larvae out of the cow dung pots, deflying the paddocks to a certain extent as well. And as I said before, they're probably one of the most profitable enterprises on our farm, and the most visually appealing in terms of you can see the benefit that they do to the soil. If you take a spade, say 2 months after a tractor's been on a certain paddock, and you dig right beside it, you can see more aggregation, more worms, a denser species, denser cover. The grass is definitely a lot darker green. And I think there's a great potential for sheep and that, in fact, or for poultry. White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia, Will Harris, he made a comment, and I thought it was so true after having run this. He said that he keeps a lot of poultry. He said that if there was no money in the poultry at all, the benefit they do for the soil health is worth it on its own. And it's something that I think more people should try and look at. So these are our chicks in the brooder. They're in the brooder for about 21 days, depending on the weather. Chickens love the heat, so if it's warmer, they're out quicker. If it's colder, they're in a bit longer. And these are our birds that are nearly finished. They're typically in the tractors for around 8 weeks, again, depending on the weather. And they're very easy to manage. It's something that could be done by small children very, very easily. This is a group of our tractors. This is the structure we're using. We've updated a little bit since then, but this is a group of, there's maybe 5 or 6 there, and we have more on the other side of this image as well. And we move those twice a day, bring feed and water, so we could move the guts of 1,000 birds in probably half an hour, on a good day. This is where kind of it all started. We do a lot of direct marketing. We started at farmers markets. This is actually in Monaghan. So we started with farmers markets. They're grand. They have their positives and negatives. A good farmers market's great. A not so good farmers market can work into very expensive. Take your time into it, the loss of stock, the cost of the market. But if you get a good one, they're great. They're great for meeting people. They're great for networking. Great for building brand awareness. And relationships. We found in this kind of direct marketing game, relationships are crucial with your chefs, customers, anybody that's dealing with your farm. It's kind of all a relationships game, in my opinion. And we've also found in our entire farm enterprise, from the livestock to this, the systems and logistics in place to effectively market your products is the single most complicated thing we've done. In terms of moving paddocks, I love nothing more than going out in the morning and lifting electric wire. But in terms of importance for the business, making sure that you've got your systems in place to run it, that's the most crucial thing. And this is my wife Susan at Coleraine Market. She is the saleswoman. I try and avoid them if I can. And she's drawing a crowd there. So that's really it. Thank you for listening. It's short and sweet.